Hello and welcome back to the Balance Patch November Cup. We are here with round 3. As earlier, I'm Keon, joined now by Jared. How are we doing?
It's a good milkshake. It's a good milkshake, baby.
We love our food here.
It's
at
the Balance Patch
Patch.
staple. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm a huge milkshake guy, and I will say, Balance Patch, top 5, if not top 3 milkshake in the entirety of New England, if not the country.
You heard it here first, folks. We don't just have incredible locals, we have incredible milkshakes. Please pull up to our locals. But anyways, our round 3 pairing, we are going to see Chris Savage against Kirsten Warkow. Now, this matchup is going to be really interesting. We picked out these teams. We thought they were super cool. So let's just get started with it. The Annihilate, Ursaluna Bloodmoon, Tyranitar, Gyarados, Volcarona, and Dragonite from Kirsten. And I think the first thing that set me off here was that clear Amulet Gyarados.
Yeah, I mean, Gyarados is definitely a Pokemon that in the past has seen a lot of play with its very large special bulk, its really, really good ability, and obviously water defensive typing is fantastic as long as you don't get anywhere close to static electricity. But regardless, this is not a Pokemon that is seen very often in Scarlet and Violet, really.
Yeah, usually when you go to cheese your opponents these days, you can just click the good old-fashioned Dire Claw and spin the wheel. Over here, we have the good old-fashioned Thunder Wave and Waterfall. This VGC player haxes the old-fashioned way, and I am absolutely here for it. Looking at the Tyranitar 2, offering a little bit of an off-meta weather mode, and the Ursaluna, and the Terra Steel Gyarados, and the Safety Goggles Annihilate to really not care about that Sandship.
There's also a low kick on this Dragonite instead of a lot of the other covers that you can run, or running Protect, or running maybe do Wing Beat, something for Grass types, but that low kick is there instead. And then obviously the base level Ursaluna Blood Moon got Hyper Voice Blood Moon, Earth Power, and Protect with that Life Orb getting a little bit extra damage. On the other side, Chris Savage comes in with another interesting Pokemon in this team. Because you see a lot of you see the basics of Regulation H. You got the Ursaluna, Goldingo, Dragonite, Rillaboom, Sneasler, but then you see Ribombee. That is an interesting Pokemon to bring to this.
Yeah, Ribombee is a really interesting Pokemon as opposed to something like that Whimsicott or even Pelipper as a Tailwind setter. Usually a lot of people like to leverage that uncontested Fake Tears into Dark types as opposed to Whimsicott, but also the Pollen Puff, being able to offer that healing into your bulkier Pokemon, such as maybe the Multi-Scale Dragonite, the Assault Vest or Ursaluna Blood Moon, that as much as it would like the Fake Tears, the Pollen Puff support is very, very helpful. Even something that can go into that Good as Gold, Golden Go for extra support.
Not to mention that this Ribombee is also with Shield Dust, so added effects are not going to have anything that are not going to do anything to this Pokemon. So especially if you're using it as that, if I get a Tailwind up, I win the game. If I Pollen Puff and heal up my teammate, I win the game. Playing around those win cons, especially when you don't have to worry about added effects, very solid.
Yeah, the niche that Ribombee has is that it can have a built-in Covert Cloak as well as the Focus Sash. It really stops it from being interrupted early on in the game. You're going to set your Tailwind, and you're going to get away with massive damage. You're going to be instantly on the back foot against this bee. And also the very reliable Rillaboom and Sneasler for that offensive instant coverage as well, with the Unburdened Grassy Seed set opting for the 3 attacks, maximizing the amount of coverage, which will certainly rip through the team of all flying, fighting, and poison weaknesses outside of that Gyarados and the Dragonite for Kirsten.
The fun thing about the Grassy Seed specifically is that you can almost always make it into a 50-50 because you set Sneasler out without Rillaboom. You're always looking at it like, oh god, there's always a Rillaboom in the back. But here we go. Opening 2 is Dragonite and Gyarados, looking like a Lance team over here on Kirsten's side. And on Chris's side, we got Sneasler and Ribombee instantly.
Yeah, I like this lead from Kirsten because, as we just mentioned, it's the only Pokemon that aren't weak to a move in Sneasler's current coverage pool. Getting an Intimidate down on the Sneasler to try and just mitigate it as much as possible right now. It doesn't even get its Unburden, though it may not need it against these slower Pokemon with that Ribombee's Tailwind able to be clicked just at any moment.
Not to mention, it's also good awareness because you don't have to worry about that white herb that a lot of Sneaslers like and then instantly triggering the Unburden effect. So now you have a little bit of room to work with. Have a -1 Sneasler. Ribombee alone isn't too much of a threat. So it's a really good lead.
Yeah. We've seen an interesting play from Kirsten here, going for, I believe, Tailwind and the Taunt. Though I really like what Chris did with the positioning here, bringing the Sneasler, but not leading it with the Rillaboom and soaking up that Unburden just yet, fearing maybe that Intimidate, wanting to cycle back, bringing the Sneasler when the time is right to proc that boost. As the Rybombi goes for the Tailwind before Gyarados can get the Taunt off.
Well, now the Tailwind's going to come out from Kirsten's Dragonite, and it is an all-even field once again. Dragonite is going to send a taunt over at Rybombi, so now there is no Protect able to keep Rybombi safe from any hard-hitting attacks that are surely coming, and it looks like Kirsten is looking to possibly get this Terra Fairy out in time to avoid getting Moonblasted and then get a little bit of extra speed from Scale Shot.
Yeah, to me, the taunt play was really interesting because you ideally want to get that off before the Rybombi can set the Tailwind, but just due to the natural speed order, Gyarados being way slower than the Rybombi, it's just not as feasible. So the only thing being turned off in Chris's Rybombi's toolkit right now is that Protect. But I don't think it wants to protect in front of these Pokemon, as we see Kirsten even contemplating the Fairy Terrassalization, not being weak to the Rybombi, but in turn turning off the walling that you do to that Rillaboom, as we see a switch from the Gyarados into the Volcarona, saving that Intimidate later.
Terra is going to come out regardless into the Dragonite, and it's going to go into the Fairy type, so it's not going to take any resisted damage, but it is not going to take that super effective, so no 2 times in here, only base, and Dragonite, again, has a ton of natural bulk and is able to soak up anything Rybombi can throw at.
Yeah, and this play from Chris was pretty good coverage. Grassy Glide, kind of forcing the Gyarados to get out or take damage, and Moonblast into the Dragonite, forcing it to, not necessarily forcing it to Terra. The multi-scale would have helped it with that hit pretty well, but we saw it still do a lot of damage anyways. As we see the Scale Shot go into the Rillaboom, a 5-hit, doing pretty substantial damage for something as physically bulky as Rillaboom.
Yeah, and now you have to play with the idea that Dragonite potentially now outspeeds Rybombi, and Rillaboom is not able to tank another one of those Scale Shots, even only if it comes out as 4. Not to mention, there's also Volcarona on the field, and that is also terrifying to the 8.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting play. The Dragonite's pretty awkwardly positioned right now, having opened itself up in terms of vulnerability to the Rillaboom. The Terra got it around being weak to the Rybombi, but it really wasn't threatening much damage back into it with Scale Shot and a measly low kick into that Light B, as the Rillaboom offers a Grassy Glide into the just swapped in Gyarados.
Even with that -1 on the Intimidate, still is unable to take less than a third of damage, because that, it still survives!
That's a crazy live.
Wow!
Yeah, one of the woes of running a more offensive Rillaboom is without that Assault Vest, you aren't as specially bulky. But the Rillaboom saying no anyways after Chris was able to masterfully position a Pollen Puff right onto the side partner, taking advantage of a more passive turn from Kirsten as they try and reposition, and unfortunately get the miss on the Rybombi.
And we still haven't seen the last Pokemon in either of these teams yet, so you don't really have too much information about what else can be swapped into between these 3, but both of these Pokemon have pretty decent cores in here. The only problem, especially for Kirsten here, is that Rybombi is going to keep healing Rillaboom all the way back up.
Yeah, Chris really saying, I don't care about your taunt, I'm just going to do my healing anyways, but this Pollen Puff was not enough for that Rillaboom as it goes down to the Volcarona's Heat Wave, not even needing to set up, just launching those moves out, no quiver, straight wave, and now the Rybombi's down to its Focus Sash, giving a pretty good opportunity for that Sneasler to come in now with Gyarados on the field, unable to intimidate the Sneasler on switching.
Yeah, not to mention that Tailwind also has just run out. Is not a Tailwind. There's no Tailwind setter on the field here for Kirsten. So now, if you roll your dice right, there's a potential here that somebody's going to sleep.
Yeah, and roll the dice. I think Chris will. You know, this is a board where I think they have more of the offensive presence with that just sped up. Sneasler getting rid of having the Volcarona on the field now means it's susceptible to that Terra Flying acrobatics, as it's not a tool that Chris has spent just yet. And the Ribombee is kind of free here to just set up another Tailwind, but I don't think it needs to do even that. You have the natural speed advantage, no way to set Tailwind, and Ribombee can just launch damage to complement the Sneasler right now. As we see the acrobatics come out, do a ton of damage to the Volcarona. No Flame Body proc as the Moonblast lands into the Dragonite.
The Heat Wave is going to come out. There is no longer a risk of the Tailwind, but Sneasler still is a ginormous one. Does not get the burn on the Heat Wave. Does get back a little bit past that halfway mark of the HP bar. But Sneasler still is a terrifying monster to just be laying there with no real way to get rid of it. And unfortunately, that's a huge switch in straight into Goldango, who has spread moves out the wazoo.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting here is I guess it would be a time to see the speed interaction between the Dragonite and the Goldango should it stay in, as if the Goldango is faster than the Adamant Dragonites as they usually run on this set, it could just launch and make it rain after the Sneasler clears the Volcarona, but we don't even see that interaction. The Dragonite swaps to the Gyarados, makes sure to leverage that Intimidate onto the Sneasler as much as possible in this late game, and we see a Terastallization finally come out from Chris's end.
He's going to go straight onto that Goldango. Water-type Terra is typically a very strong Terra for Goldango because you take neutral damage from that from ground, and then you take half it. You obviously take resistance damage into fire. Isn't really much of a huge risk here because Make It Rain is going to cash out here and take down Volcarona.
Yeah, we see a really interesting speed interaction here that I didn't take note of. The Goldango actually outspeeding the Volcarona and making sure to get the Make It Rain off before it could even try and launch a Heat Wave in its direction. So the Terastallization was a very heads-up play from Chris, not having seen the speed interaction yet, but now in future games they can be confident that the Goldango is going to outspeed and KO the Volcarona, not having to spend that Terastallization in such a way.
Yeah, unfortunately this might be the end for Kirsten here because or Kirsten here, because that Dire Claw is going to do super effective damage onto Dragonite, leaving Gyarados and one final Pokemon left. And unfortunately, that with Goldango here, most likely going to, unfortunately for Chris, not setting up that nasty plot to get back up to a +1 incoming, and still not outspeeding. Still not outspeeding and being able to put up Tailwind. This Ursaluna is a little bit in the water with some piranhas.
Yeah, I see what Kirsten's trying to go for here, trying to get a paralysis into the Sneasler, see if you can play to a bit of a cheesy endgame, as you can't hit the string cheese with that. But one of the things that strikes me here is I think if you try and go this way, you have to play for them double targeting into the Ursaluna so it can be more effective against the -1 Goldango and Sneasler on the turn after. But we just see the close combat go straight into the Ursaluna, takes about 75% of its health after the -1 close combat, and Goldango going for that Shadow Ball instead of something like that. Make It Rain, and the Gyarados living!
Oh, Lord. This actually could, this has got potential.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to live on this play, you should have gone for something like a Blood Moon into the Goldango so you could force a 2v1 against the Sneasler. But since the Goldango is the one who lives throughout the turn, I think a -1 Make It Rain just cleans up both of these Pokemon like it's nothing.
Yeah, but Goldango does have the ability to get both of these down and Make It Rain, cashing the second ticket in and KOing two Pokemon at once, and Kirsten unfortunately dropping game 1 to Chris Savage with some very nice switching and a very, very well done play from this Ribombee.
Yeah, I think the Ribombee was really well played. I think what happened early on in the set was that they got the taunt off into the Ribombee But the Ribombi wasn't really concerned with protecting after setting the Tailwind. It just got to go Pollen Puff, Pollen Puff, Pollen Puff, make the Dragonite terrestrialize to get around the Moonblast, but subsequently becoming weaker to everything else on the team. You have to, especially in a Sneasler game, you need to make sure that you have as many neutralities and assurances against that Sneasler, and we just lost that pretty early on.
Yeah, Dire Claw is one of the formats, if not the best, one of the best moves in the format, if not the best move in the format. And not to mention its RNG element, as well as Poison being super effective to Fairy is a balancing thing that is fantastic because you can't just let that type run riot. But when you give it to a Pokemon that has the speed and the power, and not to mention like the hidden kind of bulk that Sneasler has with that special defensive stat, it's a really big risk to terrestrialize into Fairy, as well as that is for Dragonite to have Terra Fairy.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to think of ways in which Kirsten could better adapt to play against Chris's team, and one of the things that struck me is outside of that Sneasler and Rillaboom that can be dealt with through the Dragonite should it not terrestrialize, the Tyranitar is pretty well positioned here to knock off the Goldengo, to break the sash of the Ribombee. I think there's a lot of options that can come out there for that Pokemon, and we saw the Volcarona just kind of become fodder to that Acrobatics. As strong as it was offensively, it didn't have that much longevity because the Gyarados found itself constantly out of position. So it'll be interesting to see how she adapts the way in which she positions the Gyarados, because I think that may be the key to navigating this matchup.
Yeah, and you are going to see that leading the exact same way, Kirsten straight out, but Chris has changed. Instead of going straight out into Rillaboom, Sneasler, going straight into Goldengo for this turn, and Goldengo obviously is a huge risk, even with Gyarados' massive special defensive stat, and with Gyarados' resistance to steel, there is still a ton of damage that can be taken straight off of this.
Yeah, I think this is a really good adaptation from Chris in the sense that Goldengo really can't be hit that well by either of these Pokemon, as we see, wow. The Moonblast through Multiscale doing so much damage.
So aggressive, and it worked out in the end.
That was absurd, Dave. Yeah, I'm almost wondering that might accidentally be in the focus, but we can talk about that later. But yeah, I see the Thunder Wave actually missing into the Ribombee. We did see that is in fact in our focus, so there's a bit of an issue there. I knew this Moonblast were doing a little bit too much damage, but we see the Volcarona come in and instead hoping to carry on the torch here against these two Fire Weaks, though I see a pretty free terrestrialization on the Goldengo at this point that you can really only catch with the Giga Drain on the Volcarona. That won't do much without a terrestrialization or a Quiver Dance setup.
Yeah, fortunately the Ribombee doesn't really threaten Volcarona super hard, so maybe the hard read is exactly what you need at the moment, but that also runs the risk of you knocking a Giga Drain into a Steel type who does not care about that at all.
Yeah, we see the Tyranitar actually coming in as the adaptation, hoping to catch all those Goldengo attacks, being at -1, having the Sand Boost, having the Assault Vest. It can do much nicer damage as Kirsten opts to go on the defensive, setting up a Quiver Dance as well in the face of this Terra Water, now Goldengo.
Yeah, and there is the Tailwind coming straight out. Tyranitar, unfortunately, meaning that this is going to start harming Volcarona as well, and getting a nasty plot off here from the Goldengo as well. Volcarona going with the Quiver Dance, getting the triple boost of special attack, defense, and speed. But this is risky. Yeah, this is very risky.
We can tell from the speed interactions in the earlier game that even after the +1, since the Volcarona was naturally slower than the Goldengo, there is no shot that the Goldengo will not move first before Kirsten's opposing Pokemon, with the Ribombee to offer some damage with Moonblast as well. Though the Tyranitar and the Volcarona are pretty specially bulky in this situation, the Tyranitar may actually be pressured to Terrastalist flying and lose its inherent second Assault Vest given to it by the sand.
And is going to commit to that terrestrialization flying incoming. But that also means that there is a slot machine raring to go, and somebody might have just hit 777.
Yeah, as we see the Tyranitar lock in that terrestrialization, Ribombi going for the Moonblast, making sure that it'll do damage into it. Super effective or not super effective, and the Goldengo just gets the clean KO on Tyranitar with a critical hit. Bringing it back down to neutral special attack after the boosts and the drops from Make It Rain. And let's just see what this Volcarona, this hopeful Volcarona can do in the face of these 4 remaining Pokemon. As it goes for the Giga Drain, gets the KO. That's pretty solid recovery coming back, bringing it just about back up to full from the Goldengo. So we see the Sash broken on the Ribombi, the Goldengo and the Terra spent on both sides, and now we have Volcarona and Gyarados against Ribombi and the world at this point with the Tailwind set.
Yeah, we haven't seen any of the other 2 Pokemon from Chris's side, so there is no information that Kirsten can even think about. But it looks like it is going to be Sneasler coming straight out, and that probably means that Rillaboom is in the back. There is a way out of this, though.
Yeah, it was honestly pretty interesting. It was pretty interesting to see the Sneasler come in right now with limited pivoting potential on Chris's side, having lost a Pokemon, because you can't just as easily drop the Intimidate than if you had just swapped in the Rillaboom to start with, but maybe afraid of a Heat Wave coming out. We see the Ribombi switching right out to the Rillaboom, but I don't think the Acrobatics at -1 will get that Volcarona without a critical hit. And this could set Kirsten up really well for this endgame.
We did see that the lock-in was a Heat Wave, and depending on a couple of
that's very
couple of damage numbers and potentially Flame
Flame
Body
Body
activation, exactly what Kirsten needed. Because that is going to leave
with a double KO.
Oh no!
Wow! That critical hit, I think, certainly mattered on Sneasler. Its worst defense stat is its physical defense. I think he can comfortably take a +1 Heat Wave, but now it's just up to the Ribombi against these 2 Pokemon. No reliable way of hitting this Volcarona, and even though it's been chipped down so much, it can still really only do that much damage to these Pokemon.
Gyarados is still Gyarados is perfect in the situation because of its massively bulky special stats. And there isn't really much that Ribombi can offer here. There's also the potential that you just get KO'd by the hit of whatever is incoming. Because Ribombi is still at Ribombi actually still faster than Volcarona, but still can't do enough damage. And by the grace of Arceus, Kirsten
the grace of that Volcarona, taking all 4 KOs that game.
That's
the Giga Drain into the
crazy.
Goldengo, the double Heat Wave, the Heat Wave in the end. I think Kirsten really played well to their outs there, realizing that the Sneasler coming in at the end meant that the Volcarona was much more free and clear to just go for the Heat Waves and clear out the rest of Chris's team. So I really like the adaptation of not only setting up the Volcarona more, but bringing the Tyranitar to make the Ribombi easier to handle, breaking that Sash automatically.
Yeah, the decision to go into Volcarona in hindsight is not the right choice, but during the game, that is what your risk is, especially because it had to be Dire Claw. You want to get some sort of stat on that, because that exact thing can happen to you if you let that Volcarona set up. Because that special attack stat, plus a Heat Wave, spread damage, potential on burns, so much can happen if you let that Pokemon get ready for everything.
Yeah, the damage adds up, certainly, especially if you're not bringing the Assault Vest Ursaluna, which I think, in retrospect, can really do a lot here. You know, the Volcarona definitely needs some setup to get going against it with the Giga Drains. The Gyarados, I think, can do decent damage into it with Waterfall, but with how bulky it is on the physical side, I'd be surprised if it weren't just a 3-hit knockout anyways. And the Terra Water here would really, really be strong. So I would be surprised not to see that Game 3 adaptation from Chris over here. realizing that Rillaboom and Sneasler against that Volcarona in the endgame were just not positioned that well.
Unfortunately, the rashness to go into Volcarona was kind of like what the situation needed for, but getting to that point, losing, and then switching in Rillaboom in that situation too, knowing that you are knowing that you're going into the flame body potentially, basically giving up a Rillaboom because there's no Assault Vest.
Yeah. And yeah, we're about to get into game 3 here. I'm really interested to see the adaptations because we saw the consistent brings from Chris game 1 and game 2, but I think they can definitely, they're within their the set, they can definitely switch it up, as we do see the Assault Vest Ursaluna, Blood Moon, as well as a switch up from Kirsten opting for that safety goggles disruptive Annihilate.
Chris has been pretty lucky on Moonblast as well. So there's also, I'm predicting there's a good chance that if you Moonblast into this Annihilate, there is going to be a little bit of a Defiant activation here. But got a couple new tools at disposals over here. Rage Fist, Close Combat, and Final Gambit as some damage dealing. Definitely doesn't want to just instantly does not want to instantly just sacrifice the Annihilate here. It looks like it's going to be a Terra instantly, though.
Yeah, I think the thing about the Annihilate on lead here is that the Final Gambit loses a lot of its offensive potential when the Ribombee can just land a super effective Moonblast into it and chunk down the amount of chip that it will do. But we do see the Volcarona instantly go for that Terrestrialization, go to the Terra Fairy. I'm wondering what exactly that was for, honestly, because between the only thing that it really changes, it doesn't change much. No.
There isn't. Yeah, there has been no change in damage from anything here.
But what we will
except
see,
for maybe Ribombee, if Ribombee wants to do some damage into it, but Volcarona is going to tank that big Blood Moon and get a Quiver Dance going.
Yeah, I will say the one thing that this Terrestrialization can be used in this board on is that Terra Fairy, Terra Blast, getting yourself a little bit more consistent damage into that Ursaluna should it go for something like that Terra Water. But the Close Combat being launched right into it, doing about 70% of Ursaluna's health, has severely diminished what it can do for the rest of this game, as Volcarona, I would say, wins that damage trade pretty comfortably, though Chris getting the Tailwind up does not spell well for this Annihilate or this Volcarona.
Yeah, there's also the chance that this Ursaluna is not built to be able to outspeed a Volcarona that has been put up with a Quiver Dance. So there's always the potential, and that damage. Then we didn't get any information from Sandstorm from that. We didn't get any information from last games about that. But that Annihilate is going to take a full Moonblast and go down to it. What a hit!
Yeah, I think that was really, honestly, that was obligatory from Chris, seeing the speed interactions. The Ursaluna Blood Moon, even after the Tailwind, got hit with the Close Combat before it could launch that Blood Moon off. So you have to clear that Annihilate, or at least work to, before the Ursaluna can move. But in doing so, opens up the Volcarona to get that Giga Drain off into the Ursaluna, as Dragonite now comes out against the Ribombee.
Incoming goes Goldengo once more.
Oh, this is really interesting because in the premature terrestrialization from Kirsten, you have now opened yourself up way too much defensively to this Goldengo that can just go for that Make It Rain like it's nothing.
Exactly, and you now, and not to mention, you don't have a defensive option on a Volcarona. Goldengo is at risk no matter what you do except switching. Chris probably has put that together, and I'm expecting to possibly see a nasty plot incoming here from Goldengo while the Moonblast goes in, and again, unfortunately, taking almost all that health, but Make It Rain is actually going to pick up that KO, and Dragonite's going to go down. Gyarados taking a good chunk of damage, but that's 2 Pokemon gone for Kirsten already.
Yeah, I think Chris realized that you don't have to make any fancy calls. You don't have to try and nasty plot this away. You're much better off trying to clear that Volcarona and making sure that you can get the most out of your turns of Tailwind as they remain. And with this 3 versus 2, I honestly don't know how much I see a way for Kirsten to break this Golden Go unless you tank the double up over -1 Life Orb, Make It Rain, and the Moon Blast from the Raibombi. But outside of that, I think Chris might have this in the bag.
This is a really unfortunate board state for Kirsten, and Chris has done very, very well, especially realizing that early on that Terra, just like that Terra Fairy means that there's so much more extra chip damage you can do with Rabombi in this matchup, and down goes Volcarona, and this very much appears like, in almost a guaranteed fashion, that this is a Chris Savage win.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would say, it's kind of easier to see in hindsight, but if you know that the Raibombi is going to be trying to target that Dragonite, you kind of have to hope that after the Quiver Dance, you would be able to live a Make It Rain from that Golden Go. It was kind of your only way out. You had to stay in and click that +1 Heat Wave. Get as close to a board wipe as you can so that Gyarados can do something in the end game. But as it is just the Gyarados left here right now, I don't see a way in which Kirsten can clutch this out, as the Pollen Puff just goes into the Golden Go, making sure it sticks around and going for a nasty plot to really make sure we have this endgame locked.
I am making sure this happens, whether you take 1,000,000 damage or 1,000,000,000 damage.
Yeah, as we see the Waterfall go into the Raibombi, just trying to get a little bit of damage, but I would say it's all but lost here.
Yeah,
as we see the terrestrialization.
Holding on to Terra this one too.
Yeah, just for insult to injury, this Raibombi going for that Terra Fairy, making sure it can get more damage in. As we see the Moon Blast come on out and almost clear that Gyarados.
Gyarados' bulk is really showing through, but unfortunately he's not going to be able to take this second one. And Chris Savage taking this set with a fantastically played game number 3.
Yeah, Jared, I think that was a really interesting set, kind of seeing it was a really good insight into how players can adapt their game styles in reaction to each other. We saw pretty consistent game plans from both players, but they gradually evolved and kind of adopted to each other throughout the set, as we saw something like that change in the Tyranitar Bring, or playing more towards the Volcarona setup, something like that.
And you saw that from the transfers from Game 1 to Game 2, and then again flipping it on Game 3 as well. Kirsten took a really, really strong lead in Game 2, was able to get that Goldengo Terra out, was able to confirm it with Giga Drain, and then Game 3 came around and Chris just had it all wrapped up.
Yeah, I think the adaptation to the Blood Moon Ursaluna, really making the Annihilate sacrifice itself to try and take a KO on it, made it so that the Pokemon in that end game, the Goldengo especially, was just pretty uncontested throughout all of that. But we are going to take a pretty quick break here and be back soon for round number 4.
Yay!